Welcome to NSG 411, Study Session 9, Quality Assurance and Risk Management. Introduction. In this study session, we will consider the discussion of quality improvement. We will also examine the aspects of healthcare that need to be evaluated. Finally, we will explore through the concept of risk management. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Discuss the concepts of quality improvement. 2. Explain the aspects of healthcare for evaluation. 3. Examine the concepts of risk management. Quality improvement. Quality improvement activities have been part of nursing care since Florence Nightingale evaluated the care of soldiers during the Crimean War. To achieve quality healthcare, quality improvement activities use evidence-based methods for gathering data and achieve desired results. QI usually involves common characteristics, a link to key elements of the organization's strategic plan, a quality council consisting of the institution's top leadership, training programs for all levels of personnel, mechanisms for selecting improvement opportunities, formation of process improvement teams, staff support for process analysis and redesign, personnel policies that motivate and support staff participation in process improvement. QI is called by many names: quality assurance, FADE, PDSA, total quality management, TQM, Six Sigma, and CQI. Using CQI to monitor and evaluate quality of care. Continuous quality improvement, CQI, is a process of identifying areas of concern, indicators, continuously collecting data on these indicators, analyzing and evaluating the data, and implementing needed changes. When one indicator is no longer a concern, another indicator is selected. Common indicators include, for example, number of falls, medication errors, and infection rates. Indicators can be identified by the accrediting agency or by the facility itself. The purpose of CQI to improve the capability continuously of everyone involved in providing care, including the organization itself. CQI aims to avoid a blaming environment and attempts to provide a means to improve the entire system. CQI relies on collecting information and analyzing it. The time frame used in a CQI program can be retrospective, evaluating past performance, often called quality assurance, concurrent, evaluating current performance, or prospective, future-oriented, collecting data as they come in. The procedures used to collect data depend on the purpose of the program. Data may be obtained by observation, performance appraisals, patient satisfaction surveys, statistical analysis of length of stay and cost, surveys, peer reviews, and chart audits. In the CQI framework, data collection is everyone's responsibility. Collecting comprehensive, accurate, and representative data is the first step in the CQI process. You may be asked to brainstorm your ideas with other nurses or members of the interdisciplinary team. Complete surveys or checklists, or keep a log of your daily activities. How do you administer medications to groups of patients? What steps are involved? Are the medications always available at the right time in the right dose, or do you have to wait for the pharmacy to bring them to the floor? Is the pharmacy technician delayed by emergency orders that must be processed? Looking at the entire process and mapping it out on a paper in the form of a flowchart may be part of the CQI process for your organization. QI at the organizational and unit levels. Strategic planning. Leaders and managers are so often preoccupied with immediate issues that they lose sight of their ultimate objectives. Quality cannot be found at the unit level if the organization is not focusing on quality issues. To stay on track, an organization needs a strategic plan. A strategic plan is a short, visionary, conceptual document that serves as a framework for decisions or for securing support or approval. Provides a basis for more detailed planning. Explains the business to others in order to inform, motivate, and involve assist benchmarking and performance monitoring. Stimulates change and becomes the building block for the next plan. During the strategic planning process, the organization develops or reviews its vision, mission statement, and corporate values. A group develops business objectives and key strategies to meet these objectives. In order to do this, a SWOT analysis is done, a review of the organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Key strategies are identified and action plans are developed. The organization's mission, goals, and strategic plan ultimately drive the outcomes and QI plan for that organization. Be proactive and participate in the process. Ask your nurse manager if there are opportunities for the staff to participate in the planning process. Staff members at the unit level can often identify quality issues because they are the ones who can feel the impact when quality is lacking. Once a process that needs improvement is identified, an interdisciplinary team is organized whose members have knowledge of the identified process. These team members meet to identify and analyze problems, discuss solutions, and evaluate changes. The team clarifies the current knowledge of the process. It identifies causes for variations in the process and works to unify the process. Structured care methodologies. Most agencies have tools for tracking outcomes. These tools are called Structured Care Methodologies, SCMs. SCMs are interdisciplinary tools to identify best practices, facilitate standardization of care, and provide a mechanism for variance tracking, quality enhancement, outcomes measurement, and outcomes research. SCMs include guidelines, protocols, algorithms, standards of care, critical pathways, and other sets. Guidelines. Guidelines first appeared in the 1980s as statements to assist healthcare providers and patients in making appropriate healthcare decisions. Guidelines are based on current research strategies and are often developed by experts in the field. The use of guidelines is seen as a way to decrease variations in practice. Protocols. Protocols are specific, formal documents that outline how a procedure or intervention should be conducted. Protocols have been used for many years in research and specialty areas, but have been introduced into general health care as a way to standardize approaches to achieve desired outcomes. An example in many facilities is a chest pain protocol. Algorithms. Algorithms are systematic procedures that follow a logical progression based on additional information or patient responses to treatment. responses to treatment. They were originally developed in mathematics and are frequently seen in emergency medical services. Advanced cardiac life support algorithms are now widely used in healthcare agencies. Standards of care. Standards of care are often discipline-related and help to operationalize patient care processes and provide a baseline for quality care. Lawyers often refer to a discipline's standards of care in evaluating whether a patient has received appropriate services. Critical or clinical pathways. A critical pathway outlines the expected course of treatment for patients with similar diagnoses. The critical pathway should orient the nurse easily to the patient's outcomes for the day. In some institutions, nursing diagnoses with specific time frames are incorporated into the critical pathway, which describes the course of events that lead to successful patient outcome within the diagnosis-related group, DRG, defined time frame. For the patients with an uncomplicated myocardial infarction, MI, a proposed course of events leading to a successful patient's outcome within the 4-day. DRG defined time frame might be as follows. A. Patient states that chest is relieved. B. ST and T wave changes resolve and pulse oximeter reading is greater than 90%. Patient has clear breath sounds. C. Patient ambulates in awe without experiencing extreme fatigue or chest pain. D. Patient verbalizes feelings about having an MI and future fears. E. Patient identifies effective coping strategies. F. Ventricular dysfunction, dysrhythmia, or crackles resolved. Critical pathways. Critical pathways are clinical protocols involving all disciplines. They are designed for tracking a planned clinical course for patients based on average and expected length of stay. Financial outcomes can be evaluated from critical pathways by assessing any variance from the proposed length of stay. The healthcare agency can then focus on problems within the system that extend the length of stay or drive up cost because of overutilization or repetition of services. Critical pathways provide a framework for communication and documentation of care. They are also excellent teaching tools for staff members from various disciplines. Institutions can use criteria. Institutions can use critical pathways to evaluate the course of care for different patient populations. Most institutions have adopted a chronological diagrammatic format for presenting a critical pathway. Time frames may range from daily, day 1, day 2, day 3 to hourly, depending on patient's needs. Key elements of the critical pathway include discharge planning, patient education, consultations, activities, nutrition, medications, diagnostic tests, and treatment. Although originally developed for use in acute care institutions, critical pathways can be developed for home care and long-term care. The patient's nurse is usually responsible for monitoring and recording any deviations from the critical pathway. When deviations occur, the reasons are discussed with all members of the healthcare team, and the appropriate changes in care are made. The nurse must identify general trends in patient outcomes and develop plans to improve the quality of care. To reduce the number of deviations, through this close monitoring, the healthcare team can avoid last-minute surprises that may delay patient discharge and can predict length of stay more effectively. Questions the team needs to ask. 1. Who are our customers, stakeholders, markets? 2. What do they expect from us? 3. What are we trying to accomplish? 4. What changes do we think will make an improvement? 5. How and when will we pilot test our predicted improvement? 6. What do we expect to learn from the pilot test? 7. What will we do with negative results, positive results? 8. How will we implement the change? 9. How will we measure success? 10. What did we learn as a team from this experience? 11. What changes would we make for the future? Aspects of healthcare to evaluate. A CQI program can evaluate 3 aspects of healthcare: the structure within which the care is given, the process of giving care, and the outcome of that care. A comprehensive evaluation should include all 3 aspects. When evaluation focuses on nursing care, the independent, dependent, and interdependent functions of nurses may be added to the model. Structure. Structure refers to the setting in which the care is given and to the resources, human, financial, and material that are available. The following structural aspects of a healthcare organization can be evaluated. A. Facilities. Comfort, convenience of layout, accessibility of support services, and safety. B. Equipment. Adequate supplies, state-of-the-art equipment, and staff ability to use equipment. C. Staff. Credentials, experience, absenteeism, turnover rate, staff-patient ratios. D. Finances, salaries, adequacy, sources. Although none of these structural factors alone can guarantee quality care, they make good care more likely. A higher level of nurses each shift a higher proportion of registered nurses are associated with shorter length of stay. Higher proportions of RNs are also related to fewer adverse patient outcomes. Process. Process refers to the activities carried out by the healthcare providers and all the decisions made while a patient is interacting with the organization. Examples include: A. Setting an appointment. B. Conducting a physical assessment. C. Ordering a radiograph and magnetic resonance imaging scan. D. Administering a blood transfusion. E. Completing a home environment assessment. F. Preparing the patient for discharge. G. Telephoning the patient post-discharge. Each of these processes can be evaluated in terms of timeliness, appropriateness, accuracy, and completeness. Process variables include psychosocial interventions such as teaching and counseling, and physical care measures. Process also includes leadership activities such as interdisciplinary team conferences. This set can be highly specific, such as listing all the steps in a catheterization procedure, or it can be a list of objectives, such as offering information on breastfeeding, or it can be a list of objectives, such as offering information on breastfeeding to all expectant parents or conducting weekly staff meetings. The American Nurses Association (ANA) standards of care are process standards that answer the question, what should the nurse be doing and what process should the nurse follow to ensure quality care? Outcome. An outcome is the result of all the healthcare providers' activities. Outcome measures evaluate the effectiveness of nursing activities by answering such questions as: did the patient recover? Is the family more independent now? Has team functioning improved? Outcome standards address indicators such as physical and mental health, social and physical function, health attitudes, knowledge and behavior, utilization of services, and customer satisfaction. The outcome questions asked during an evaluation should measure observable behavior such as the following: A. Patient: wound healed, blood pressure within normal limits, infection absent. B. Family: increased time between visits to the emergency department, applied for food stamps. C. Team: decisions reached by consensus, attendance at meetings by all team members. Some of these outcomes, such as blood pressure or time between emergency department visits, are easier to measure than others. Equally important outcomes, such as increased satisfaction or changes in attitude. Although the latter cannot be measured as precisely, it is important to include the full spectrum of biological, psychological, and social aspects. For this reason, considerable effort has been put into identifying the patient outcomes that are affected by the quality of nursing care. A major problem in using and interpreting outcome measures is that outcomes are influenced by many factors. For example, the outcome of patient teaching done by a nurse on a home visit is affected by the patient's interest and ability to learn, the quality of the teaching materials, the presence or absence of family support, information which may conflict from other caregivers, and the environment in which the teaching is done. If the teaching is successful, can the nurse be given full credit for the success? If it is not successful, who has failed? It is necessary to evaluate the process as well as the outcome to determine why an intervention such as patient teaching succeeds or fails. A comprehensive evaluation includes all three aspects: structure, process, and outcome. However, it is much more difficult to gather and monitor outcome data than to measure structure or process. Risk management. An important part of CQI is risk management, a process of identifying, analyzing, treating, and evaluating real and potential hazards. The Joint Commission (JC) recommends the integration of a quality control or risk management program to maintain continuous feedback and communication. To plan proactively, an organization must identify real or potential exposures that might threaten it. Risk is one of the most overlooked areas in small businesses, in spite of the fact that it is clear to most small business owners that operating any business involves risk. While taking a risk and winning is fun, prudent business owners take care to minimize the risk, just as you would in any other type of risky venture you undertake. In the 1990s, the field of risk management expanded to include managing financial risks as well as those associated with changing technology and internet commerce. As of 2000, the role of risk management had begun to expand even further to protect entire companies during periods of change and growth. As businesses grow, they experience rapid changes in nearly every aspect of their operations, including production, marketing, distribution, and human resources. Such rapid change also exposes the business to increased risk. In response, risk management professionals created the concept of enterprise risk management, which was intended to implement risk awareness and prevention programs on a company-wide basis. Enterprise risk management seeks to identify, assess, and control sometimes through insurance. The main focus of enterprise risk management is to establish a culture of risk management throughout a company to handle the risks associated with growth and a rapidly changing business environment. Writing in Best Review, Tim Thompson recommended that business owners take the following steps in implementing an enterprise-wide risk management program. 1. Incorporate risk management into the core values of the company. 2. Support those values with actions. 3. Conduct a risk analysis. 4. Implement specific strategies to reduce risk. 5. Develop monitoring systems to provide early warnings about potential risks. And 6. Perform periodic reviews of the program. The term risk management is a relatively recent, within the last 20 years, evolution of the term insurance management. The concept of risk management encompasses a much broader scope of activities and responsibilities than does insurance management. Risk management is now a widely accepted description of a discipline within most large organizations. As a nurse, it is your responsibility to report adverse incidents to the risk manager, according to your organization's policies and procedures. In many states, this is a legal requirement. Risk events are categorized according to severity. Although all untoward events are important, not all carry the same severity of outcomes. 1. Service occurrence. A service occurrence is an unexpected occurrence that does not result in a clinical significant interruption of services and that is without apparent patient or employee injury. Examples include minor property or equipment damage, unsatisfactory provision of service at any level, or inconsequential interruption of service. Most occurrences in this category are addressed within the patient complaint process. 2. Serious incident. A serious incident results in a clinically significant interruption of therapy or service, minor injury to a patient or employee, or significant loss or damage of equipment or property. Minor injuries are usually defined as needing medical intervention outside of hospital admission or physical or psychological damage. 3. Sentinel event. A sentinel event is an unexpected occurrence involving death or serious permanent physical or psychological injury, or the risks thereof. The phrase "or the risks thereof" includes any process variation for which a recurrence would carry a significant chance of a serious adverse outcome. Such events are called sentinel because they signal the need for immediate investigation and response. When a sentinel event occurs, appropriate individuals within the organization must be made aware of the event. They must investigate and understand the causes of the event, and they must make changes in the organization's systems and processes to reduce the probability of such an event in the future. The subset of sentinel events that is subject to review by JC includes any occurrence that meets any of the following criteria. A. The event has resulted in an unanticipated death or major permanent loss of function, not related to the natural cause of the patient's illness or underlying condition. B. The event is one of the following, even if the outcome was not death or major permanent loss of function: suicide of a patient in a setting where the patient receives around-the-clock around-the-clock care, e.g., hospital, residential treatment center, crisis stabilization center, infant abduction or discharge to the wrong family, rape, hemolytic, transfusion reaction involving administration of blood or blood products having major blood group incompatibilities, surgery on the wrong patient or wrong body part. Adhering to nursing standards of care as well as the policies and procedures of the institution greatly decreases the nurse's risk. Common areas of risk for nursing include: A. Medication errors, B. Documentation errors and/or omissions, C. Failure to perform nursing care or treatment correctly, D. Errors in patient safety that result in falls, E. Failure to communicate significant data to patients and other providers. Risk management programs also include attention to areas of employee wellness and prevention of injury, latex allergies, repetitive stress injuries, carpal tunnel syndrome, barrier protection for tuberculosis, back injuries, and the rise of antibiotic-resistant organisms all fall under the area of risk management. Adhering to standards of care and exercising the amount of care that a reasonable nurse would demonstrate under the same or similar circumstances can protect the nurse from litigation. Understanding what actions to take when something goes wrong is imperative. The main goal is patient safety. Reporting and remediation must occur quickly. Once an incident has occurred, you must complete an incident report immediately. The incident report is used to collect and analyze data for future determination of risk. The report should be accurate, objective, complete, and factual. If there is future litigation, the plaintiff's attorney can subpoena the report. The report should be prepared in only a single copy and never placed in the medical report. It is kept with internal hospital correspondence. Nurses have a responsibility to remain educated and informed and to become active participants in understanding and identifying potential risks to their patients and to themselves. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Maintaining a knowledgeable, professional, and caring nurse-patient relationship is the first step in decreasing your own risk. It is important that the small business owner and top managers show their support for employee efforts at managing risk. To bring together the various disciplines and implement integrated risk management, ensuring the buy-in of top-level executives is vital. Luis Ramiro Hernandez wrote in Risk Management, "These executives can institute the processes that enable people and resources across the company to participate in identifying and assessing risks and tracking the actions taken to mitigate or eliminate those risks." The practice of risk management utilizes many tools and techniques, including insurance, to manage a wide variety of risks. Every business encounters risks. Some of them are predictable and under management control, and others which are unpredictable and uncontrollable. Risk management is particularly vital for small businesses, since some common types of losses such as theft, fire, flood, legal, liability, injury, or disability can destroy in a few minutes what may have taken an entrepreneur years to build. Such losses and liabilities can affect day-to-day operations, reduce profits, and cause financial hardship severe enough to cripple or bankrupt a small business. But when many large companies employ a full-time risk manager to identify risks and take the necessary steps to protect the firm against them, small companies rarely have that luxury. Instead, the responsibility for risk management is likely to fall on the small business owner. Basic risks such as fire, windstorm, employee injuries, and automobile accidents, as well as more sophisticated exposures such as product liability, environmental impairment, and employment practices, are the province of the risk management department in a typical corporation. Although risk management has usually pertained to property and casualty exposures to loss, it has recently been expanded to include financial risk management such as interest rates, foreign exchange rates, and derivatives, as well as the unique threat to businesses engaged in e-commerce. As the role of risk management has increased, some large companies have begun implementing large-scale, organization-wide programs known as enterprise risk management. Risk management is the identification, assessment, and ranking of risks, followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to minimize, monitor, and control the probability and/or impact of unfortunate events, or to maximize the realization of opportunities. Risks can come from uncertainty in financial markets, project failures, legal liabilities, credit risk, accidents, natural causes and disasters, as well as deliberate attacks from an adversary. Several risk management standards have been developed, including the Project Management Institute, the National Institute of Science and Technology, actuarial societies, and ISO standards. Methods, definitions, and goals vary widely according to whether the risk management method is in the context of project management, security, engineering, industrial processes, financial portfolios, actuarial assessments, or public health and safety. Risk management in nursing attempts to analyze problems and minimize losses after a patient's care error occurs. The strategies to manage risks including transferring the risk to another party, avoiding the risk, reducing the negative effects of the risk, and accepting some or all of the consequences of a particular risk. Certain aspects of many of the risk management standards have come under criticism for having no measurable improvement on risk, even though the confidence in estimates and decisions increase. In ideal risk management, a prioritization process is followed whereby the risks with the greatest loss and the greatest probability of occurring are handled first, and risks with lower probability of occurrence and lower loss are handled in descending order. In practice, the process can be very difficult, and balancing between risks with a high probability of occurrence but lower loss versus a risk with high loss but lower probability of occurrence can often be mishandled. Intangible risk management identifies a new type of a risk that has a 100% probability of occurring but is ignored by the organization due to a lack of identification ability. For example, when deficient knowledge is applied to a situation, a knowledge risk materializes. Relationship risk appears when ineffective collaboration occurs. Process engagement risk may be an issue when ineffective operational procedures are applied. These risks directly reduce the productivity of knowledge workers, decrease cost effectiveness, profitability, service, quality, reputation, brand value, and earnings quality. Intangible risk management allows risk management to create immediate value from the identification and reduction of risks that reduce productivity. Risk management also faces difficulties in allocating resources. This is the idea of opportunity cost. Resources spent on risk management could have been spent on more profitable activities. Again, ideal risk management minimizes spending and minimizes the negative effects of risk. Methods of risk management. For the most part, these methods consist of the following elements, performed more or less in the following order. 1. Identify, characterize, and assess threats. 2. Assess the vulnerability of critical assets to specific threats. 3. Determine the risk, that is, the expected consequences of specific types of attacks on specific assets. 4. Identify ways to reduce those risks. 5. Prioritize risk reduction measures based on a strategy. Principles of risk management. The International Organization for Standardization, ISO, identifies the following principles of risk management. Risk management should create value, be an integral part of organizational processes, be part of decision making, explicitly address uncertainty, be systematic and structured, be based on the best available information, be tailored, take into account human factors, be transparent and inclusive, be dynamic, iterative, and responsive to change, be capable of continual improvement and enhancement. Processes involved in risk management. According to the standard ISO 31000 risk management, principles and guidelines on implementation, the process of risk management consists of several steps as follows. 1. Establishing the context. This involves A. Identification of risk in a selected domain of interest. B. Planning the remainder of the process. C. Mapping out the following: the social scope of risk management, the identity and objectives of stakeholders, the basis upon which risks will be evaluated, constraints. 2. Identification of the risk. After establishing the context, the next step in the process of managing risk is to identify potential risks. Risks are about events that, when triggered, cause problems. Hence, risk identification can start with the source of problems or with the problem itself. Source analysis. Risk sources may be internal or external to the system that is the target of risk management. Problem analysis. When either source or problem is known, the events that a source may trigger or the events that can lead to a problem can be investigated. For example, stakeholders withdrawing during a project may endanger funding of the project. Privacy information may be stolen by employees even within a closed network. Lightning striking an aircraft during takeoff may make all people on board immediate casualties. The chosen method of identifying risks may depend on culture, industry, practice, and compliance. The identification methods are formed by templates or the development of templates for identifying source, problem, or event. Common risk identification methods are objective-based risk identification, scenario-based risk identification, taxonomy-based risk identification, common risk checking. Risk charting. Assessment. Once risks have been identified, they must then be assessed as to their potential severity of loss and to the probability of occurrence. These quantities can be either simple to measure, in the case of the value of a lost building, or impossible to know for sure, in the case of the probability of an unlikely event occurring. Therefore, in the assessment process, it is critical to make the best educated guesses possible in order to properly prioritize the implementation of the risk management plan. The fundamental difficulty in risk assessment is determining the rate of occurrence, since statistical information is not available on all kinds of past incidents. Furthermore, evaluating the severity of the consequences impact is often quite difficult for immaterial assets. Asset valuation is another question that needs to be addressed. Thus, best educated opinions and available statistics are the primary sources of information. Nevertheless, risk assessment should produce such information for the management of the organization that the primary risks are easy to understand and that the risk management decisions may be prioritized. Thus, there have been several theories and attempts to quantify risks. Numerous different risk formulae exist, but perhaps the most widely accepted formula for risk quantification is rate of occurrence multiplied by the impact of the event equals risk composite risk index equals risk. The above formula can also be rewritten in terms of a composite risk index as follows. Composite risk index equals to impact of risk event times probability of occurrence. The impact of the risk event is assessed on a scale of 0 to 5, where 0 and 5 represent the minimum and maximum possible impact of an occurrence of a risk, usually in terms of financial losses. The probability of occurrence is likewise assessed on a scale from 0 to 5, where 0 represents a 0 probability of the risk event actually occurring, while 5 represents a 100% probability of occurrence. The composite index, thus, can take values ranging from 0 through 25, and this range is usually arbitrarily divided into 3 sub-ranges. The overall risk assessment is then low, medium, or high, depending on the sub-range containing the calculated value of the composite index. For instance, the 3 sub-ranges could be defined as 0 to 8, 9 to 16, and 17 to 25. Note that the probability of risk occurrence is difficult to estimate since the past data on frequencies are not readily available, as mentioned above. Likewise, the impact of the risk is not easily to estimate since it is often difficult to estimate the potential financial loss in the event of risk occurrence. Further, both the above factors can change in magnitude depending on the adequacy of risk avoidance and prevention measures taken and due to changes in the external business environment. Hence, it is absolutely necessary to periodically reassess risks and intensify or relax mitigation measures as necessary. 4. Potential risk treatment. Once risks have been identified and assessed, All techniques to manage the risks fall into one or more of these four major categories. 1. Avoidance. Eliminate, withdraw from, or not become involved. 2. Reduction. Optimize, mitigate. 3. Sharing. Transfer, outsource or insure. 4. Retention. Accept and budget. Ideal use of these strategies may not be possible. Some of them may involve trade-offs that are not acceptable to the organization or person making the risk management decisions. Another source from the U.S. Department of Defense, Defense Acquisition University, calls these categories ACAT, ACAT for avoid, control, accept or transfer. This use of the ACAT acronym is reminiscent of another ACAT for acquisition category used in U.S. defense industry procurement, in which risk management figures prominently in decision-making and planning. Risk avoidance. This includes not performing an activity that could carry risk. An example would be not buying a property or business in order to not take on the legal liability that comes with it. Another would be not flying in order not to take the risk that the airplanes were to be hijacked. Avoidance may seem the answer to all risks, but avoiding risks also means losing out on the potential gain that accepting, retaining the risks may have allowed. Not entering a business to avoid the risk of loss also avoids the possibility of earning profit. Hazard prevention. Hazard prevention refers to the prevention of risks in an emergency. The first and most effective stage of hazard prevention is the elimination of hazards. If this takes too long, is too costly, or is otherwise impractical, the second stage is mitigation. Risk reduction. Risk reduction or optimization involves reducing the severity of the loss or the likelihood of the loss from occurring. For example, sprinklers are designed to put out a fire to reduce the risk of loss by fire. This method may cause a greater loss by water damage and therefore may not be suitable. Alarm fire suppression system may mitigate that risk, but the cost may be prohibitive as a strategy. Acknowledging that risks can be positive or negative, optimizing risks means finding a balance between negative risks and the benefits of the operation or activity, and between risk reduction and effort applied. By an offshore drilling, contractor effectively apply HSE management in its organization. It can optimize risks to achieve levels of residual risks that are tolerable. Risk sharing. Briefly defined as sharing with another party the burden of loss or the benefit of gain from a risk, and the measures to reduce a risk. The term of risk transfer is often used in place of risk sharing in the mistake belief that you can transfer a risk to a third party through insurance or outsourcing. In practice, if the insurance company or contractor go bankrupt or end up in court, the original risk is likely to still revert to the first party. As such, in the terminology of practitioners and scholars alike, the purchase of an insurance contract is often described as a transfer of risk. However, technically speaking, the buyer of the contract generally retains legal responsibility for the losses transferred, meaning that insurance may be described more accurately as a post-event compensatory mechanism. Risk retention. involves accepting the loss or benefit of gain from a risk when it occurs. True self-insurance falls into this category. Risk retention is a viable strategy for small risks where the cost of insuring against the risk would be greater over time than the total losses sustained. All risks that are not avoided or transferred are retained by default. This includes risks that are so large or catastrophic that they either cannot be insured against or the premiums will be infeasible. War is an example, since most property and risks are not insured against war, so the loss attributed by war is retained by the insured. Also, any amount of potential loss, risks over the amount insured, is retained risk. This may also be acceptable if the change of a very large loss is small, or if the cost to insure for greater coverage amount is so great it would hinder the goals of the organization too much. Create a risk management plan. Select appropriate controls or countermeasures to measure each risk. Risk mitigation needs to be approved by the appropriate level of management. For instance, a risk concerning the image of the organization should have top management decision behind it, whereas IT management would have the authority to decide on computer virus risks. The risk management plan should propose applicable and effective security controls for managing the risks. For example, an observed high risk of computer viruses could be mitigated by acquiring and implementing antivirus software. A good risk management plan should contain a schedule for control implementation and responsible persons for those actions. According to ISO/IEC 27001, the stage immediately after completion of the risk assessment phase consists of preparing a risk treatment plan, which should document the decisions about how each of the identified risks should be handled. Mitigation of risks often means selection of security controls, which should be documented in a statement of applicability, which identifies which particular control objectives and controls from the standard have been selected and why. Implementation. Implementation follows all the planned methods for mitigating the effects of the risks. Purchase insurance policies for the risks that have been decided to be transferred to an insurer. Avoid all risks that can be avoided without sacrificing the entity's goals. Reduce others and retain the rest. Review and evaluation of the plan. Initial risk management plans will never be perfect. Practice, experience, and actual loss results will necessitate changes in the plan and contribute information to allow possible different decisions to be made in dealing with the risks being faced. Risk analysis results and management plans should be updated periodically. It is also important to keep in mind the distinction between risks and uncertainty. Risks can be measured by impact x probability. Risk in business. Means of measuring and assessing risks vary widely across different professions. The various means of doing so may define different professions, e.g., a doctor manages medical risk, a civil engineer manages risk of structural failure, etc. A professional code of ethics is usually focused on risk assessment and mitigation by the professional on behalf of clients, publicly, society, or life in general. Risk communication. Risk communication is a complex, cross-disciplinary academic field. Problems for risk communicators involve how to reach the intended audience, to make the risk comprehensible and relatable to other risks, how to pay appropriate respect to the audience values related to the risk, how to predict the audience response to the communication, etc. A main goal of risk communication is to improve collective and individual decision-making. Risk communication is somewhat related to crisis communication. 7 cardinal rules for the practice of risk communication. As first expressed by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and several of the field's founders, accept and involve the public or other consumers as legitimate partners. Plan carefully and evaluate your efforts with a focus on your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Listen to the public's specific concerns. Be honest, frank, and open. Coordinate and collaborate with other credible sources. Meet the needs of the media. Speak clearly and with compassion. Risk management in nursing. Losses in nursing practice may include financial loss as a result of malpractice or absorbing the cost of an extended length of stay for the patient. They can also include negative public relations and employee dissatisfaction. If quality management was 100% effective, there would be no need for risk management. In the current healthcare environment, however, risk management departments are needed and utilized. Risk management has blossomed since the malpractice crisis in the 1970s. Before that time, healthcare was assumed to be safe and of high quality, except for a very few expectations. Healthcare professionals were revered and medical treatment was not questioned. The abundance of liability suits in the 1970s had people doubting the validity of their faith in quality healthcare. The inclusion of risk management standards in the 1990 JCAHO guidelines further emphasized the importance of risk management. The Risk Management Department has several functions. These include the following: define situations that place the system at some financial risks, such as medication errors or patient falls. Determine the frequency of those situations that occurred. Intervene and investigate identified events. Identify potential risks or opportunities to improve care. Each individual nurse is a risk manager. The nurse has the responsibility to identify and report unusual occurrences and potential risks to the proper authority. One method of communicating risks is through incident reporting. Incident report should be a non-punitive means of communicating an incident that did cause or could have caused harm to clients, family members, visitors, or employees. This report should be used to improve quality of care and decrease risk. Although these developments offer opportunities to enhance patient care, nurses must also be aware of the implications for their own accountability. One way to embrace this accountability and to meet the demands of clinical governance is to engage in risk management. By adopting the principles of risk management, nurses can act proactively to ensure they provide a high-quality service that meets patients' needs. Hospital-based nursing faces difficult challenges from the vantage point of risk management. Encouragingly, the continuous and passionate work of nurse leaders to improve patient safety and quality is clearly interfaced with decreasing liability and risks of harm. Many risk management challenges and corresponding strategies are the same as nationwide clinical initiatives in patient safety. The role of the nurse manager in directing patient care and influencing change from a risk perspective is paramount to success. Risk management is the process by which vulnerabilities are identified and changes are made to minimize the consequences of adverse patient outcomes and liability. Related clinical initiatives to reduce risks and harm should be part of a larger organizational commitment to patient safety. In a true culture of safety, everyone in the organization is committed and driven to keep patients safe from harm. It's under the umbrella of a patient safety culture that risk managers and nurse leaders effect the most successful clinical change. Human error is often unavoidable, unpredictable, and unintentional. Nurse managers and risk managers conduct root cause analysis (RCAs), which are opportunities for organizational learning and development of corrective action strategies. However, RCAs are reactive responses. Organizations should also employ proactive risk assessment for vulnerabilities that can be corrected. Let's look at the top challenges experienced within large teaching community hospitals and how they can be addressed. The case examples are hypothetical cases. Patient identification. Case: it's 9 a.m. The transporter arrives to take Mrs. S for a computed tomography scan with contrast. The patient says she's not supposed to have any test, but the transporter insists she's on the schedule and the radiology department is very busy, so they have to hurry. Mrs. S has the exam. Mrs. J in the other bed was actually scheduled for the test. In almost every case of mistaken patient identification, there's human error. Factors usually involved, as identified by staff nurse, interviews and surveys, include being in a hurry, not following policy, language barriers, missing ID bands, staff carelessness, and patients answering to the wrong name. In the above case, staff didn't listen to the patients and there was a lapse in the patient's identification process, both at the patient's bedside and in the testing area. It's no wonder that the first Joint Commission National Patient Safety Goal (MPSG) concerned patient identification. Risk management strategies revolve around the basic patient safety rule of using two patient identifiers to verify identity. Encouraging patient involvement in combination with active listening skills of staff is key. Using a second identifier that patients know, such as their date of birth or last 4 digits of their social security number, facilitates patient participation. To admire this practice during patient transport, the use of a trip slip or ticket to ride has been implemented in many organizations. It's modeled after the time-out process, during which right patients and right procedure are verified before commencement of a procedure. Although it takes extra time and can lead to transport delay, it's an excellent strategy to avert ID error and improve handoff between departments. Some organizations have chosen patient identification as a red rule, meaning the two identifier rule must be followed without exception, or there are defined consequences. Correct specimen labeling is another vulnerable area in the patient identification arena. The importance of bedside labeling, using two identifiers, akin to what's done for blood transfusion administration, is vital. Chance of mislabeling increases when the process is moved away from the bedside. There's promise of hardwiring patient identification processes using technological solutions. Barcode scanning devices are being used in medication administration and glucometer testing. More applications, such as in bedside specimen labeling, are expected. Hospital-acquired infections (HAIs). Case: Mr. H was brought into the ED unresponsive and hypotensive. In the ED, a femoral line was placed for emergency access. After transferring him to the ICU, the femoral line wasn't changed as per hospital protocol and CDC recommendations. Approximately 48 hours later, the patient became febrile with an elevated white blood cell count. Blood cultures were positive in 4/4 bottles for Enterococcus. HAIs are often avoidable complications that are in the public eye and under scrutiny by regulatory agencies, insurance companies, and malpractice attorneys. A press release from the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology states that the greatest challenges to preventing central line-associated bloodstream infection (CLABSI) are policy enforcement, adequate education, comprehensive surveillance, data management, and full hospital leadership commitment. Factors are present in all healthcare organizations struggling to decrease HAIs. The bundle checklist has become a relatively simple yet powerful strategy to standardize practice. When each critical step is identified, agreed on, observed at each procedure, and supported by hospital leadership, then you have the recipe for decreasing risk. Nursing must be empowered to stop the process, which clearly makes a huge difference. The Institute for Healthcare Improvement first introduced the use of a bundle checklist during the successful 100K Lives campaign in 2005, later followed by a related joint commission, NPSG, and it works. You can't forget important steps when you have a real-time guide to check off at the procedure. The key here is that all concerned follow the process, communicate with each other, and don't regard it as an exercise in post-procedure penmanship. Other strategies include gathering and using process and outcome data along with daily surveillance and intervention by both nurses and infection control practitioners. After each CLABSI, it's helpful to have a multidisciplinary process to identify root causes and needed system improvement. A red rule supporting use of the insertion bundle checklist can be effective. These strategies work for all HAIs, not just CLABSI. Enforcement of the golden rule of hand washing is an important facet on the road to reducing risks from HAI. As with all efforts to improve safety, best practice must be identified and shared, along with identifying and fixing barriers. A recent publication from the Joint Commission Center for Transforming Healthcare provides a matrix on hand hygiene that outlines contributing factors, solutions, and level of impact. Strategies include improving accessibility of dispensers and sinks, efficiency of workflow, and just-in-time coaching for reinforcement. Communication or escalation. Case: Mrs. F has been in labor for 10 hours. Her electronic fetal monitoring has started to show absent variability with prolonged decelerations. Nurse N Ask the resident to look at the strips. The residents recommend the nurse to keep observing. After 10 minutes of no improvement, Nurse N escalates to the attending physician, who assures her the baby will be born soon and nothing more needs to be done. Baby F is born with an abject score of 2 and 4, requiring resuscitation and NICU admission. Prenatal death or loss of function is on the top 10 Joint Commission Sentinel events list. In this case, the nurse attempts to communicate her concern and escalates to an attending, but is in a difficult situation. She's reached the top of the physician tree. It's a time-sensitive situation, and there's no agreement on case urgency. Several factors challenge nurse communication and escalation, including fear of disruptive behavior, cultural or gender perceptions and experiences, as well as clinical competency and mutual trust and respect. An analysis of nurse claims from 1997 to 2007 revealed that communication and escalation are 2 of the top 3 recommendations to reduce risk for nursing liability. One remedy specific to this case scenario is the development of an OB rapid response team, one in which the nurse is permitted to request the team. When called, the team of OB experts responds to the situation, thus relinquishing the nurse from any further escalation. Rather than experiencing frustration, the nurse feels empowered to provide a safe environment for patients and promote good outcomes. Other remedies include an organizational code of conduct with 0 tolerance of disruptive behavior, chain of command policies, multidisciplinary team training, and use of structured communication techniques. Medication administration. Case: a 30-year-old man comes into the ED level 1 trauma unit as one of several victims of a motor vehicle accident. A new ED nurse picked up multiple medications as prescribed on this patient and was distracted by the physicians giving additional verbal orders. She forgot to label 2 syringes that contained clear liquid. A 30-year-old man comes into the ED level 1 trauma unit as one of several victims of a motor vehicle accident. A new ED nurse picked up multiple medications as prescribed on this patient and was distracted by the physicians giving additional verbal orders. She forgot to label 2 syringes, one meant to be given IV and the other subcutaneously. One meant to be given IV and the other subcutaneously. She inadvertently administers the subcutaneous medication IV. The patient subsequently colds and dies. Medication error is also on the top 10 Joint Commission Sentinel events list. Multiple vulnerabilities existed for this error to occur. An emergency situation, multiple distractions, verbal orders, novice nurse, and failure to label syringes are obvious ones. Interruptions occur in at least 50% of medication administrations, and each interruption is associated with over a 10% increase in procedural failures and clinical errors. Syringe labeling is a basic safety procedure and even a Joint Commission (NPSG). Why would a nurse fail to label syringes not prepared and immediately administered at the bedside? Once again, the risks add up: interruptions, perception of low risk, rushing, possibly even a lack of labels. Engaging staff, especially involved staff, in identifying barriers and their fixes goes a long way. Consistent reinforcement of the process is essential. Many other major risk areas besides syringe labeling exist in the omnipresent nursing responsibility of medication administration. Failures in medication reconciliation, transcription, pharmacy prescription review, and more. Electronic solutions are most beneficial in advancing safety and decreasing risk. Computerized provider order entry features clinical alert, standardized orders, clarity, immediate transmission to pharmacy, and decreased turnaround time for medication availability. Barcode medication administration eliminates transcription, manual documentation of medication administration, and many sources of error. Clinical alarms. Case: a cardiac patient requiring continuous heart rate and reading monitoring died in January after developing a lethal arrhythmia for 22 minutes and systole for 17 minutes before being found by staff members. You can't avoid reading about this very public alarm tragedy in newspapers and nursing journals. Alarm problems are on the 2010 top 10 medical device hazard list from the ECRI Institute, a non-profit healthcare research organization. Multiple research studies identify caregiver fatigue from false and nuisance alarms as problematic, leading to distrust in alarms and even tampering. The recent Gulf of Mexico oil rig explosion was found to involve alarm bypasses due to false alarms. Alarm fatigue is a real and daunting challenge, as more and more patient care equipment is beeping at the bedside and in patient care units. Strategies to reduce risk include layering of alarm systems such as monitor technicians, integrating alarms into nurse beepers or phones, improving audibility of high-priority alarms, and modifying equipment so alarms can't be turned off. Reducing nuisance or false alarms is critical and involves competency skills, lead placement, signal assessment, individualization of alarms, alarm recognition, and troubleshooting skills can be taught but need practice and experience to perfect. Standardized procedures for clinical alarm monitoring, communication, and documentation responsibility are necessary. Random audits and observations on alarm response times and procedural expectations promote accountability and opportunity for education and learning. Frequent inspections and testing of the alarm systems, possibly on each shift, should also be adopted. Infusion pump safety. Case: Mr. B is in the ED after sustaining a non-hemorrhagic stroke. A heparin infusion of 12 units kg per hour is prescribed. The nurse programs the pump to 12 ml per hour without using the pump's medication library. The mistake isn't caught until the patient's partial thromboplastin time is over therapeutic 6 hours later. Of all medication errors, IV medications are twice as likely to cause patients harm. Use of smart pumps with customized medication libraries, rules, and dose alerts is recommended. But smart pumps aren't smart on their own. The FDA has issued guidelines requiring infusion pump manufacturers to supply more test data before approval due to over 700 deaths and 50,000 complaints reported to the FDA in the last 5 years. There's even been a recent recall of an infusion pump by a well-known manufacturer. Successful strategies to improve infusion pump safety and reduce error include easy-to-use technology, standardized infusion ordering protocols, 100% compliance with dose mode, drug library that mirrors clinical practice, protocols to support override verification, staff education and involvement, data analysis, preferably with wireless, concurrent data transmission, use of data to make appropriate library or practice changes, vendor support, partnership with biomedical engineering, random auditing. False. Case: an 82-year-old male is admitted to a medical floor with a diagnosis of dehydration, pneumonia, and urinary tract infection. Is confused at times, especially at night. A fall risk assessment is completed on admission, which puts him at high risk for falls. 4 precautions are taken, and the family insists on a 1:1 companion. While the companion was preparing the patient's evening tea, the patient fell from his bed and fractured his hip, requiring an open reduction internal fixation. Patient falls is another Joint Commission Top 10 sentinel event, but even under the most monitored situations, patients fall. Initial and ongoing fall risk assessment with a concurrent fall risk reduction care plan is important. Interventions include call bell placement, frequent rounding, regular toileting, proximity to the nurse's station for observation, low beds, mobility alarms, enclosure beds, wristbands, room signage, color-coded blanket or socks, and companions. An interdisciplinary approach individualized to the patient is beneficial. For example, collaborating with pharmacy for medication interactions which may affect balance or cognition, as well as physical therapy for strengthening. A dilemma sometimes facing nursing and risk management is balancing patients' independence with maintaining safety. As the scenario depicts, even a 1:1 companion doesn't prevent falls. Several statewide associations have implemented collaboratives around fall safety. A Safe from Falls Patient Care Bundle was developed by the Maryland Patient Safety Center. F. Falls risk screening. A. Assessment of risk factors. L. Linked interventions. L. Learn from events. S. Safe environment. A statewide campaign of the same name is being promoted by the Minnesota Hospital Association with over 100 participating hospitals. Numerous tools and protocols are available on the association's website. Lining up strategies with consistent application will reduce risk from falls. When feasible, discuss with the patients their vulnerability to falls and the safety plan to promote participation. Hospital-acquired pressure ulcers. Case: a 74-year-old frail female with a history of diabetes and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was admitted from a long-term care facility for difficulty breathing. Her condition deteriorates and she is intubated and sedated. A skin assessment isn't completed upon admission. On day 5 of admission, a nurse documents a stage 2 pressure ulcer on the sacrum and a stage 1 on both heels. There's sparse documentation throughout her hospital stay, and the transfer summary to the long-term care facility is silent on the condition of the patient's skin. Upon arrival at the nursing home, the admitted nurse documents stage 3 pressure ulcers. Documentation isn't essential, and the lack of it in this case clearly demonstrates increased liability. Assessment and documentation of findings is the third of the top 3 recommendations to reduce liability in the nurse claims study mentioned in Case 2. A comprehensive skin assessment must be done upon admission, with periodic reassessment throughout the hospital stay, including at the time of any transfers. Clearly documented presence on admission scheme breakdown is critical not only for reimbursement purposes but also from the risk and standards of care perspectives. Risk assessment using established measures such as the Brandon scale standardizes practice. Frequency of ongoing risk assessment and documentation must be defined by the organization. Assessment every shift of pressure areas is minimal for patients at high risk. Monthly prevalence rounds with sharing and benchmarking of units and overall outcomes facilitate goal achievement. Turning and positioning as part of regular patient rounding is fundamental, along with staff education at all levels in prevention, assessment, pressure ulcer staging, and intervention techniques. The value of the certified wound care nurse specialist, both in individual cases and for overall program development, can't be overstated. Developing unit champions for daily coaching and resource is another good strategy. Bundled preventive measures such as skin savers pull it all together. S. Suspend use. K. Keep the head of bed at 30 degrees. I. Inspect skin daily and at every turn. N. Nutrition and hydration. S. Side-lying positioning 30-degree angle. A. Apply moisture barrier if incontinent. V. Vigilant skin care and moisture. E. Encourage mobility. R. Reposition at least every 2 hours. S. Support surfaces bed and chair. Catchy bundles help staff stay focused on necessary steps and promote accountability. Clinical competency. Case: Mrs. L is receiving chemotherapy via a peripheral line. The float nurse encounters resistance to flow and repositions the patient's arm. 2 hours later, the patient complains of severe burning at the site, and the nurse notes the IV is infiltrated with significant redness and swelling. She discontinues the line and applies a warm compress, but is unaware of the protocol for chemoinfiltrations. The patient develops compartment syndrome and requires surgical intervention. Right staffing, as a management responsibility, involves more than quantity. It also means matching staff competencies to patient needs. Managers must identify required competencies based on the population served and standards of care in the clinical area, including documentation and communication skills, and then regular assess staff competencies. It not only makes sense, but also is a Joint Commission standard, HR 010601. Availability of 24-hour staff resources is a component of facilitating clinical competency. Temporary staff, whether per diem, float, or agency, can only be assigned patients within their scope of practice and competency level. The primary nurse must also recognize the relationship of clinical competency to patient safety when delegating patient care responsibilities to others. Nursing staff unable to demonstrate a competency should be helped to achieve it through coaching, education, and subsequent observation. Sometimes, a nurse may fail to achieve the performance standard, and if the reasons can't be identified and rectified, then another position must be chosen by the practitioner to ensure patient safety and organizational or individual liability reduction. Staff and managers should collaborate at all levels to ensure the right people are in the right places at the right time. Retained foreign bodies. Case: the surgeon is closing the patient's abdomen after a difficult colectomy and is assured by the scrub and relief circulating nurse that the final count is correct. The relief circulating nurse was heard arguing with the charge nurse during the final count. During the cavity count, the resident pulled a lap pad from the sterile field to secure a bleeder. The patient is transferred to the post-anesthesia care unit, and several hours later, a routine abdominal X-ray identifies a foreign body behind the liver. Retained foreign bodies are on both the Joint Commission Sentinel event and ECRI Institute Top 10 hazard list. Root causes of foreign body retention include distraction, fatigue, human counting error, lack of count procedures, difficult operations, and other factors. Risk reduction strategies include using a shoe-back type lap pad holder for easy visualization of all counted laps, count when staff change, at cavity closure, and at skin closure final count are best practice. Whenever the circulating nurse is relieved, there should be a hand-off to include the count. Lap rings must never be detached. A timeout during the final count, in which there is no conversation or distraction, is another remedy. An X-ray before leaving the OR can be done in high-risk cases. Technology in this arena, which looks to add higher success, is radio frequency identification, where sponges are tagged and a wand is swept over the surgical area to identify any retained sponges. Cost-benefit analysis would be expected following your organization's value analysis procedures. This is one of many OR safety tools available to reduce risk of surgical error. Leadership. Looking at the strategies identified for each challenge, it's evident that there are overall leadership approaches to reducing risk and harm and improving patient safety. 3 steps to success are identified by the Joint Commission Center for Transforming Healthcare. 1. Set expectations. 2. Educate. 3. Build accountability through measurement, feedback, leadership, and coaching. It's not an easy as 1, 2, 3, but sustainable change is possible using this leadership bundle for change, combined with a systems approach that concentrates on the conditions under which individuals work, identifying barriers, and implementing changes to remove them. We cannot change the human condition, but we can change the conditions under which humans work. Nurse and organizational leaders must provide needed resources and send consistent messages about safety and expectations. It takes a long time for culture to change, so tenacious and passionate nurse leaders are a necessity. Steps in the risk management process. These steps are: 1. Determining the objectives of the organization. 2. Identifying exposures to loss. 3. Measuring those same exposures. 4. Selecting alternatives. 5. Implementing a solution. And 6. Monitoring the results. Characteristics of a strong risk management program. 1. Senior management champions the program. 2. They are inclusive. 3. They are transparent. 4. They are holistic. 5. They are proactive. Conclusion: the importance of risk management in projects can hardly be overstated. Awareness of risk has increased as we currently live in a less stable economic and political environment. By implementing an effective risk management program, companies protect their ability to compete. Nothing is more fundamental to business success. Energy should be put into preventive activities such as providing a safe physical environment, fostering good personnel relations, satisfying patient desires, and providing high-quality service. Risk management should include patient relations, safety and security, quality assurance, quality management, and liability control. Every nurse should bear it in mind that she is a risk manager and should be able to identify and properly manage risks as they arise. Study session summary. In this study session, we considered the discussion of quality improvement. We also examined the aspects of healthcare that needed to be evaluated. Finally, we explored through the concept of risk management. End of study session 9. Thank you for viewing.